Welcome to The Life of Hair. My name's James Atkinson. Thank you for joining me in this week's episode. Now, this week's episode is one that I've been meaning to make for a very, very long time. Don't know why haven't got around to it yet, but here I am doing it right here, right now for you. And just before I get into the video, as always, look, a massive thank you to everybody who watches the channel, subscribes, does all those great things. Please keep it up. If you're new here, subscribe. There's loads and loads of videos coming every Sunday for sure. Some Wednesdays we deliver a video, some Wednesdays I do a live. And if you want more Life of Hair education, especially live education, then check out the description down below to become a Patreon of The Life of Hair. Now, that's enough for me this week. I know sometimes my intros go on and on and on, but this week we're not going down that road. We're going to talk straight off the bat. We're going to talk mixing bleach. What does it mean? I can mix bleach. What's he talking about? I've been hairdressing for so many years. I just know how to mix my bleach. But do you know why you mix it like that? Do you know how it performs differently if you mix it differently? Stick around to see what happens and how the different ways and consistencies of mixing bleach affect the way it performs. I know there's going to be a lot of you out there just like right at this point going, oh, what's he talking about? I know how to mix bleach. Come on, stick with me for a minute. You might learn something. Now, the first thing I'm going to tell you is, it's really important. It's really, really important. I cannot emphasize how important it is. Weigh your bleach. Weigh it out. Do not guess. Do not free pour. Do not just get the bowl and put the powder in and pour it in to the consistency that you think is correct. Because you will have inconsistent results, guaranteed. The reason you'll have inconsistent results is because of something I'm going to tell you in just a moment. But please get some scales. It's not difficult to weigh things out. A cupful of here, a dashful of there. Let's just get a little bit more accurate, shall we? You know, don't want to go down that road. Look, it's really, really super duper important that we're all on the same page when we come to mixing bleach, because how it performs, how we make it perform, is very, very important to our end results. And you know, when you look at these Instagram posts, YouTube videos, and you're wondering how they got the hair that light, sometimes it's not the application, sometimes it's what they do with the bleach, how they've mixed it and what ratios they've used. So let's get right into the nitty gritty of this video. And rather than me telling you, I'm going to show you the differences in consistency and what each of those consistencies will achieve on each bleach powder. But it doesn't matter if it's bleach powder, it can be clay lighteners, any of the above. This is about chemistry. This is about an alkaline meeting an acid and how those two things interact. So the first ratio we're going to talk about is 1:1. 1 part, e.g. 1 gram of peroxide and 1 gram of your lightener, whichever lightener you choose to use. Now, I know certain manufacturers have got certain mixing ratios, and that is fine, but all of this is just chemistry, okay? So if we're free pouring our bleach, we will be creating different amounts of alkalinity and acidity going up and down the scale, because we might have added a little bit more peroxide one time or a little less powder. Let's just get on with what happens when we do this. Now I'm going to show you what the consistency is like when we mix on a 1:1 ratio. So we've got ourselves a bowl, we've got our scales all ready to go. We're going to put in some bleach powder into this bowl. Now I'm just going to go with 10 grams. So carefully measure out your 10 grams so you know you've got exactly 10 grams. 10, lovely. Put that to one side. Lovely job. Right then, so the next thing we're going to do is put 10 grams of peroxide on top of this. Okay, so we've got 10 grams and 10 grams. 10 grams of peroxide, 10 grams of bleach powder. We're going to mix it to see what consistency this will produce. And obviously it's going to be pretty thick. Now this is a manufacturer's recognised mixing ratio. You cannot do 1:1 on scalp. Now, why do you think you can't do 1:1 on scalp? Answers in the comments box down below. Well, whilst you're writing out your answer, I shall tell you why you cannot do 1-to-1 on scalp, or why you shouldn't do 1-to-1 on scalp. So all peroxide is acidic. So we've got an acidic peroxide mixing with an alkaline bleach. Now, let's say the bleach powder, I don't know the exact figures, but let's say it's 12 on the pH scale, right up in the alkaline zone. And then this is like 3 at the acidic end. The two meet and they create a new pH, let's say 10. These are just guesstimates because each manufacturer is different. And I'm not talking about one manufacturer, I'm just talking about bleach in general. So you mix the 11 with the 3, we get a 10. Or the 13, or whatever the alkalinity is to whatever the acidity is. Bringing the two together, one will neutralise the other. The acidity will neutralise the alkalinity. So this is a very, very strong mixture. Strong as you can make it, really, without it being too thick. Now this is pretty thick, as you can see. It's a bit like, I don't know, polyfiller, I guess, for want of a better way of describing it. And that is obviously not going to be great for many applications. Balayage, potentially, you know, if you want a very, very thick, heavy application, you want to get the maximum amount of lift. One problem with this, though, is it will dry out very quickly. Now, on that particular note, okay, saying that it's going to dry out very, very quickly, what could we do to prevent it from drying out? My go-to balayage ratio, favoured ratio, is a 1-to-1.5 mixture. So that would have 10 grams of powder, and then we'd have 15 grams of peroxide. Now there's 1 gram on my brush, so I'm going to set it to 24 because I've set my brush down over there with the product still on it. So let's mix this now and see what the consistency of this looks like. Now this is how I would balayage hair. Now this is definitely not an official mixing ratio for sure. It doesn't say this on the packet anywhere, but it does say 1-to-1, 1-to-2 and 1-to-3. So I'm sure 1-to-5 isn't a bad thing. And I wouldn't probably put 1-to-5 on scalp. Sorry, 1-to-1.5 on scalp. So it would be more of a balayage kind of consistency, and it's a nice consistency to paint with. It goes on really well. It's nice and thick. It's not as thick as 1-to-1, but obviously it does last a little bit longer. Now I've put more peroxide in the bowl. What does that mean? That means that there is more acidity going into the alkalinity. So it's brought down the alkalinity further. And let's say it's gone from, I don't know, 10 or whatever the alkalinity is, I mean, down to say 9. We're just keeping things simple, guys. This is not like precision science, because it's precision science is not relevant. The fact is you've put more acidity into something that's alkaline and you're bringing down the pH scale. You're bringing it down to more of an acidic colour. Now, it's probably not 10-9. It's probably 10 to 9.5, but let's just try and stay with the kind of focus of what we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to achieve creating bespoke mixes of bleach for different jobs to get the job done in the most efficient way possible. And the way to do that is to know exactly how you've mixed it previously. So here we have the 1-to-1.5 ratio, my personal preferred balayage ratio. Okay. So the next ratio is 1-to-2. So I'm going to do it up to 29 because, as I said, there's 1 gram of product in my brush. Now we've got the 1-to-2 ratio. In this bowl, we have got 10 grams of bleach powder and 20 grams of our peroxide. This would be my go-to highlighting mixing ratio. It's thinner. It saturates through the section that you're foiling easier and gets to the hair underneath, because obviously you're not painting both sides on a foil. You just need that product to travel through the section. So we're going to get nice, even saturation, which means we're going to get nice, even lift on the hair. And this is my go-to highlighting mixture. Now, some of you will say, well, I want my highlighting mixture to be thicker than that. Well, then do a 1 to 1.5 mixing ratio for your highlights. That's fine. You know, the fact I use mine for balayage, we're all different, okay? Some of you will like 1 to 1 for your highlights because you'll have this idea maybe that it won't spill out or swell if you do it like that. But the reality is that it's very unlikely to swell anyway, just by the nature of modern hair colour. Some bleaches do swell still, but this particular product doesn't swell in my use case scenarios that I've used it for. So I am very confident that 1 to 2 will do the job very well. Now 1 to 2 is sometimes used for balayages as well, but not very often these days. I used to do that back in the day, not so much now. It's always 1 to 1.5. So that is my highlight go-to for on a personal note. Now, the other thing that I use 1 to 2 for is on scalp bleach applications. 1 to 2 is my go-to on scalp bleach application. It's the first time the manufacturer recommends on the packaging, on most brands that I've read the packaging on, and I haven't read them all, so there will be some of you out there that say, my brand doesn't say that. But of all the manufacturers I've ever used, and I've used quite a few, 1 to 2, that is the first on scalp recommendation. Now, I think 1 to 2 works perfectly on scalp. You know my thoughts on scalp bleaching. Cake it on so you can't see the hair. You can lay this on really nicely. As I say, it saturates beautifully. You know, this for me is my on scalp application mixing ratio. Because the 1 to 1.5, I'm dubious as to whether you should actually do 1 to 1.5 on the scalp. 1 to 1 you definitely can't do on the scalp. So 1 to 2 is the first on scalp application. Now what's the next step from here? Well, it's 1 to 3. So we've got 10 to 30. 10 grams of powder and 30 grams of the peroxide. So let's take that up now. Now remember, there's 1 gram on my brush, so it's going to be 39. Lovely job. Right then, so this is 1 to 3. Now, don't use 1 to 3 that much, gotta say. It is very, very watery at 1 to 3. It really is quite drippy. But there is one time I use 1 to 3, and that is at the backwash for like cleansing out oversaturated hair. I sometimes even mix it 1 to 4 for oversaturated hair. It's very runny, it's very workable, you can really get it into the hair. I do not do blonde washes with water. I've mentioned this in a previous video. The pH of water is 7, dependent on the water type and where it is, and you know, whether it's mineral water or whatever, but the water out the tap is generally a 7 pH roughly, unless you're going to have like some water is actually 5.6 and around that kind of mark, and that's kind of ionized water or mineral water and stuff like that. You know, they tend to be at the lower end, but you know, pushing them into the acidic end. But generally, if you just take it out of the tap, it's around 7, which is way more alkaline than the peroxide. Okay, so you're going to mix an alkaline product that is designed to go with an acid product together to make something that is a better acidity. Instead you're going to mix it with something that's pH neutral, and then it's got from say 13 for the bleach powder and 7, you create something that's really alkaline. And any of you that have ever put water and bleach in a bowl onto someone's hair and felt the condition and the feeling of their hair afterwards, it feels like a swear word that I'm not going to say. Look, it's just not, I know there's loads of people that recommend it, it's just not cool. It just doesn't work out on the hair because it opens the cuticle really wide, really fast, because it's really alkaline. Remember, alkaline opens the cuticle, acidity closes the cuticle. So I never ever mix my bleach with water to do a blonde wash, cleanse, whatever you want to call it. I always mix it with peroxide, and sometimes I'll put some cleansing cream, shampoo in the bowl, just so it spreads a bit further. Remember, the more peroxide you put in the bowl, the more acidity you're adding to the alkalinity, and the more you're dragging it down. So you're making the product weaker anyway. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be sitting here saying, well, James, what about peroxide strengths? How does this affect things? Well, this is where it becomes a little bit more complicated. And this harks back to a video that I made about using strength of peroxides. Low and slow contravenes manufacturer's guidelines, whereas fast and furious, or the manufacturer's guidelines, may not be what we're seeing a lot of on YouTube and Instagram in the last weeks, months and years. So choosing the right mixing ratio with the right peroxide can make all, well, not even can make all the difference, or will make all the difference to the outcome of your colour results. So it is about understanding how these things work and freehand pouring. Please guys, today, promise me, hit that thumbs up button if you promise me you will give up on freehand pouring. If you've made it this far into the video, you're obviously interested, you're obviously wanting to change what you do, learn new things and make a better informed decision with your colouring. So please hit that thumbs up button just to promise me that you're going to think about change. Now, you know, scales are cheap. Get them on Amazon, get them on wherever, doesn't matter. Super cheap scales, you know, run off little batteries, Bob's your uncle, wear your product out, know what you're using. And then the added bonus to all this is when you come to remix your product, you know what you used previously and you can just go back into the dispensary area and mix up exactly the same consistency and you'll get exactly the same result. So if you're, say, starting in a full head and you're doing the nape area and you're working your way and you're changing your peroxide halfway, you've got exactly the same mixing ratio. Therefore, you've got a drop in peroxide because you're started with a lower peroxide at the back and you end up with a higher peroxide at the front. Because you have used a peroxide and a mixing ratio that is exact, when you then bump your peroxide and you use the same mixing ratio, you are going to get expected results. You're not going to get that last 3 foils or 10 foils that you then remixed and you made it a little bit sloppier, not lifting as well as the other foils around it and wondering why. Because I know, I've seen that 1,000 times. Quick remix, freehand pour, drop a bit of product, in you go, mix, 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 back you go, put your foils in. Those last 10 foils that you remixed for, or last 3 foils, take forever and a day to lift because you just put way more peroxide in potentially and made it a lot less alkaline and therefore a lot less efficient for those last few foils. And those last few foils you want to lift fairly quickly anyway, no? Because obviously the rest has been on, you want to kind of get it off all efficiently. So I'm just trying to show you all the case scenarios where this accurate mixing and understanding how you mix up each and every ratio of bleach to peroxide is important. So we're going to quickly recap. 1:1, thickest ratio, strongest ratio. Don't put 1:1 on scalp. 1:1.5, nice balayage consistency, not so thick as 1:1. Probably we still wouldn't put it on scalp. 1:2, on scalp applications, bit thinner, great for highlights. Not as strong as 1:1 or 1:1.5, but perfectly efficient. 1:3, removing tone, backwash treatments, onto damp hair, things like that. You know, a great corrective tool. 1:4, even sloppier, even looser to apply to the hair. Great for dry hair. If you want to do a quick, you know, take out a tone, take out a toner even, but don't take out toners unless you can ensure that you're not going to lift the hair around the toners. You know, if you've got the highlights and you want to take out a toner and you've got natural hair present, you will lift that natural hair. So don't do that. Just bear that in mind. Just something to think about. And they are like the kind of best ratios. I'll keep them on the screen for a minute. They are the best ratios. And if you accurately mix them, you will get great results. And don't forget, a ratio is just, say 1:1 is 1 gram to 1 gram. 1:1.5 is 1 gram of powder and 1.5 grams of the peroxide. 1:2, 1 gram of the powder, 2 grams of the peroxide. You get it. It goes on and on and on. It's not crazy maths. It's not difficult. If you mix in 10 units, so 10, 20, it's really easy to work out the amount of peroxide you need to go in the bottle. So, on that note, I don't think there's anything to add to mixing bleach. Hopefully you know everything there is to know now about mixing bleach. Obviously, this is just one look. There are different manufacturers with different mixing ratios, with different specific things, because they spent the time in the laboratories to create different ratios, different ways of doing things. I am not vouching for every single brand here. So I know loads of you are going to jump in the comments and say, my brand says this, my brand says that. That's great. That's why they went to the labs. That's why they spent hundreds of hours developing these products. but I'm just talking generically so you understand the relationship between alkalinity and acidity. This will never change. The bleach will always be alkaline and the peroxide will always be acidic. I've been James Atkinson. This has been an episode of The Life of Hair. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, do me the favour, thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already. Chat to me down in the comments box. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you've just heard and what your manufacturer might recommend, dependent on who you use. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you again for another episode of The Life of Hair very, very soon.